Welcome, everybody, to today's Mentor Time. Today, we're going to talk about references and recommendations, how to ask and get a timely submission. And my takeaway of this is getting a timely reference is your work first. I'm sure you're saying to yourself, of course it is, Sue. But by that, and some of you have heard me say this, don't make me do your work for you. So you have to always think about the other side of the convo and what do they need. So what do I hear from people about getting resumes? Sue, no matter how many times I remind them, they're not timely, even when I tell them there's a drop dead deadline. We all know those things happen for sure. This is a real life example from what happens. It's happened twice in the last 6 months. I sent them information and emails, but they're late in getting it submitted. This person sent me 4 different ways to find information, find her information. And we get people who say, Sue, I don't want them to contact my previous company. And I get that. And we're going to be addressing all of these today. How are we going to get there? First, we're going to talk about who do you ask for references and recommendations, and make sure you're clear about that. And this is not just for job seeking. Sometimes it's for promotions. It may be for fellowships or awards or testimonials. There's different ways beyond a job seeking recommendation that you're looking for. Then we're going to talk about where are we right now on when employers or awarding organizations are asking for recommendations. That is changing. And as always, we end with what should you do? All right. Let's start with who do we ask for references and recommendations? How do you select them? How many? Here's what the typical wisdom has been. Usually it's 1 to 2 recommendations from your boss, your supervisor, someone who knows you professionally, and may also be from a person who knows you well. I'm finding that there is a little more latitude from direct supervisors and professors, for example. Here they are. Boss and supervisor, yes, we know that they're going to want to ask your company about you and get some input on the boss if you've left a company or when you leave your company. Next might be for those of you in school, especially the teaching assistant, the research assistant, and or professors, and even staff at the colleges and universities. HR will be giving references quite often, depending, usually at the first screening interview nowadays, that's very common. And then there's colleagues. Maybe your colleagues are going to act as a recommender for you, a referee or a referrer. There's a lot of ways we call these. We have peers that may be our recommenders, and these may not be colleagues. They may not be doing the same kind of work, but similar work or know you in a professional way. And don't forget about mentors, coaches, advisors of all kinds. Those people are acting more and more as references. And finally, don't forget about people you know in a variety of ways, including volunteer work, the leaders of those work, or your team captain or a team member, internship or capstone supervisors, and many others that that may know about your current work. And that doesn't mean you know how to do program evaluation like Sue does. It means showing up on time, working as part of a team, helping to contribute, making sure that outcomes are being reached, etc. So when we look at these, the 3 in the left-hand column are the usual ones. But now we have a wider pool, which is really helpful for you all to know as our work options and being employees, relationship with employers is changing. I want to cover quickly what employers are able to share about you. It came from an article about being fired, but this applies to every organization in the United States, and Ron will be able to add later about Canada. The information that many companies have in the US is that they don't allow staff often to speak directly to someone seeking a reference. Often it's referred directly to HR. But at the minimum and even the maximum, HR is allowed to verify your title, the title you left with, to verify your leaving salary. They don't have to give all your salary, and to give the dates of employment. Some companies, mine included, the one I retired from, said nothing other than that. They didn't talk about performance, whether it was the HR person or the hiring manager. I was not allowed to talk about performance if I was ever contacted by that. But there are company policies, and you can find out more, for example, through an exit interview. Ask them, what will you share about my work history? I just wanted to slide this slide in here because we all know that there are jobs where it's not a good job fit, or it's not a good boss fit, or it's not a good culture fit. And this came directly from Quora. That's why it's in the red on the left-hand side, because Quora uses red. And these are quotes that they had for the first two especially. Said, tell the truth. If you messed up and got fired, say so. Most people are not being fired nowadays for performance. It's all the multiple layoffs. But you don't have to say I was fired. You can say I was let go as part of a large layoff or a small layoff. If you want to get attention, and this is again people who've answered on Quora, the answers about covering up things. This person who wrote the comment said, don't hide it. Tell them what happened and be honest about the difficulties with the supervisor, and say, go ahead and call him, meaning the supervisor, to give you a reference. But I wanted you to know before you do, the difficulties I had with them. And the longer version of this, which is at that URL, the person who wrote it said, I would be very inclined to listen carefully to what the leaving employee says to me so that I can understand, because firings up for performance are always a two-sided story, the person being let go and the person who has to let that person go. And the final is a recommendation I hadn't heard before, but I thought this is great advice. Be prepared if there is a culture fit issue or a job fit issue or a boss fit issue. Be prepared to give some references from other jobs where you can say, for example, the job I had before the one I only kept for 6 months, I stayed at for 8 years. I worked as part of a team. I always got great performance reviews. So I have that demonstrated history of people that I worked effectively with and made great progress in my career then. And just a reminder that the world is small and people will use informal channels. So occasionally I don't get them anymore, but I used to get people calling up and saying, Sue, you worked with so-and-so. What do you think about him? Or, Sue, why did you hire this person when I was giving you really good hints when you asked me about them, about it wasn't going to be a person who would work out for you? All right, that's all the ways that you can be prepared for how and in what way your progress as a job seeker, as a fellowship seeker, if you're applying for things, that people try to give information on you. But just as a reminder, in the US, companies are very afraid of litigation or very sensitive about lawsuits, so they're going to say the least amount possible. Let's go on to when references are happening nowadays. I want to clarify that when a company asks you for references, that doesn't mean they're checking references. I deliberately left this in from 2023 when we last talked about this topic in a different way, where it said, oh, if your references are good, they're probably going to give you a job offer. Because guess what? That's all out the window. That looking at your references is generally thought to be this, and this is an article from last year, where you're contacted to give your references after they've decided they're maybe going to offer you a job or get closer to offering you a job. And they're in gray deliberately because those are not being seen. Those are still active, but they're not being seen so much, and there's no standard. But what's in yellow about providing references with an initial application, I'm here to tell you it is happening more and more. I've had people applying for academic positions where they're being asked to give them into a database. People are saying that when they apply for a job, they had to put the referees in immediately. And what that means is that you need to be prepared to submit your referees' names, your referrers' names, your recommenders' names, whichever is clearer for you, the person or the three people who are going to write this. I do want you to think about how much and how quickly time passes. So you've been in a job, you've left your job, and how long is your supervisor going to feel comfortable talking about your work? And for peers, colleagues, and the other people in the other columns, it's again a question of thinking about it each time you need to use a referral. How much time has gone by? So if it's the people in the left column, supervisor, professor, teaching assistant, or human resources, if you've stayed in touch, not necessarily call them up and be their best buddies, but if you've checked in with them or they've watched your career, maybe they're on LinkedIn and you see them interacting, might be several years. It's probably going to be shorter nowadays. But the other thing that happens is, depending on how senior you are, you may find people retiring a year or two after you left. And for those people, you probably want to take them off your list pretty quickly. Some people don't mind being contacted in retirement, but it's part of what we'll be looking at and asking you to think about when you reach out for these. So let's talk about what you should do now to go forward. And this is an area that I find over and over again. People are in a rush when they get a job and they think, oh, that's great. And then suddenly someone wants references and they haven't prepared their referees. So you need to be prepared by preparing your referees. First, just identify the people you think you want to ask. Then you want to organize these. And I have the Google link for you. I'll send it out with the recording as well if you want to use the spreadsheet I set up. That includes all of the name of the person that you want to be a referee in the line, how you know them, when you worked with them, and then any special issues. But that way you will begin to be able to keep your own organization of it, because you don't even know in 6 months if the person who you left the job with, who was your supervisor at your previous job, you don't know if they're even still there. You're in the gathering phase. So now we need to make sure that you get their approval, confirm their actual title and name, the full thing, and make sure you have their updated contact information. This preparation is getting ready to write a message. And it sounds funny, but the message is going to be longer than you think, because here's what you need to explain to them. And I'm sure, going to be by email, so you're going to have to put in an interesting title. I haven't gotten to that. I didn't go to that level of detail. First, you're just going to briefly tell them what you've been doing. That leads into what the focus is of your job search, so that you can remind them. Hi, it's Sue. Remember when I took your categorical data stats class? I discovered I love data, and I'm going on, and now I want to be a data scientist. So I'm applying for jobs. But then you need to say to them, I will have all the information ready and organized, because if you want a timely answer, you need to give it to them in a way they can use it immediately. So you don't need to tell them everything, but you need to just say something about, I will have it all in one place, and you'll see in a minute how I'm recommending you do that. Then you need to say specifically what you need from them. I need an application that gets submitted directly by you by November 15th, 2026. And we only have 3 more days to go, so I hope you can meet my timeline. I hope you don't wait that long, but sometimes it happens. The next two things are critical for you. You need them, hopefully, to have read this whole thing. It's going to be about a paragraph and a half, probably, maybe 8 or 10 lines. You need them to confirm their approval. And to do that, you want to make it easy to respond. Please just respond with a one-line email response back to me in this message saying, and give them the exact wording so they can go ahead and paste it in there for them. Or say, please call me on my cell phone at night. I don't answer it. You can leave a voicemail if you want to give your approval that way. Don't be surprised. I don't know how many people will represent what I'm about to show you, but referees, people who write references often, maybe professors at universities and colleges. I certainly set it up after I got my surprises like that, where I got 4 different emails with all this information, and most of it was links that I had to go look at to do the person's work for them, right? Don't make me do your work for you. So I actually set up a form with all these variables and said, if you want me to write you a recommendation, you've got to put everything in here. And one of the most important things for me is I may know you, but you need to tell me what 3 or 4 things in your career, in your achievements, do I need to mention in that? And in fact, I suggest for everybody, when you are asking for a recommendation, you should be giving text that's already drafted for them to be able to respond to you in a timely fashion. But it doesn't end there. You need to keep your referees updated. Here's what I find happens. I agreed 2 or 3 years ago to be a reference for someone that I worked with over 3 months or longer, and then periodically. And I always make it clear that I've worked in a mentoring capacity, but I equate that to work characteristics and why I'm able to comment on work performance. What happens though is, and it happened a couple months ago, I suddenly got a request from a university to write a reference for someone who I didn't even know she was going back to school. You may be busy, but please remember, do not click your submit button until you've at least let them know you've used their name, and hopefully send them the job posting or whatever else you're applying for. So don't leave us hanging, and don't make me have to email you to say, okay, I wrote the best I could because it was due in 24 hours. Hope that you get in. Next time, please send me it ahead of time. And finally, one thing that you also can do when you have extenuating circumstances, such as a problem with job fit, a problem with boss fit, you may want to keep a short document like this to give more context to someone for the kind of work that you did, so that you can show your employer in this spreadsheet in category 2, the lowest row down, oh, I was great, I had great reviews, blah, blah, blah. And then your recent one, it was clear after 3 months it wasn't going to work out because the person who was reporting to me left, and they decided not to fill that position. And it was impossible for me to do both jobs, no matter how I worked with my supervisor to narrow down my list of responsibilities and tasks. So to repeat the takeaway, getting a timely response is your work first. If you make it easy for the person by putting everything in one file, one way to put the information in one place that they can retrieve it all, and when it's partially drafted, so the person can say, let me take these chunks out and then I'll put around it what I want to say about whether Ron's a good worker or not. I'll say you're an excellent worker, Ron, of course. So here we are now, and I will ask Ron to give us your thoughts on what I added and let me know what I left out.
Yeah, it's really interesting because I was thinking over my own career, and I don't think I ever had to give a reference. I seem to have, just because of my peculiarities of my own circumstances, I ended up being self-referential. I don't know. I had enough of a profile that I didn't have to do it. So I'm a bit of a disadvantage. However, I have given references. And so it's interesting because, on one hand, in the presentation, we're talking about restrictions that employers are applying to themselves. So on one hand, it's I don't want to tell you anything other than confirm that you were an employee. And then on the other hand, when we want a reference, we're actually trusting that you're going to hear complementary content so that it's going to support the submission for a job application. So this tension that I think is really interesting in this problem. I love the idea of pre-answering. However, it's I'm going to throw a curveball here, and is okay. So you actually did seriously mess up, and you're asking, and I'm thinking of a particular time when I was asked to be a reference, and the person should not have asked me, really shouldn't have, because the person had really messed up. And
Mm.
so I had no choice but to be honest. And I don't think the person got the job. And the person wouldn't have been suited and all the rest of it. I did the right thing. But it's an awkward situation. It's difficult to be on that side. So it is worthwhile understanding the challenge that when you ask somebody to speak on your behalf in some form or other, that it's a challenge because they want to be honest. And so I think that's the thing, is when we give them a proposed way of looking at you, as that's a proposal, and they're going to look at it and say, okay, I'll put it in my own words because I don't like your wording or whatever. But they're going to write up something, and you trust that the kind of content that you're sharing is good enough of a hint to say, oh, remember when I did this and remember when I did that, and so on and so forth, because that's the kind of stuff that you want, because it matches your CV, your resume, your application. So you want that kind of stuff to be emphasized.
Yeah.
So I think that's the kind of things that you're suggesting here. And so it's a very interesting challenge. And I think that I really love the idea of the prepared kind of, just as a reminder, here's the kind of stuff that you and I did together, and so on. And I think that's great. As a person, like when I was in the military, we were always required to do honest appraisals of performance. And we had a very strict structure around it, and so on. So we got pretty good at being critical of performance. And very often you're rating people on a scale and then giving substantiation and so on. So that's actually a healthy practice, I think. So when I am a colleague, when do I get a chance to practice evaluating my coworker? And because it's your coworker who's probably going to
Yeah.
give you your
Yeah.
best references. How do I help my coworker be able to express the kind of stuff that I'm going to ask them for later on when you don't know that?
Yeah.
So I think it's an interesting challenge, and I really love like I said, I love the idea of the tables and so on. So you're so kind to us when you build these documents, and they make it easy for everyone. And I think it's great, because that does make it so much simpler to just, okay, get my thoughts together. And so I thank you on behalf of the others who are going to be watching this later for putting that effort into it. So it's really helpful.
I think I live in tables. I live in Excel. Anyway, yeah, but the other thing that it helps the people do is if they have to write something for me, I need them to write a rationalization for the job they want. And I can't tell what is it they want to emphasize in that work. And I don't, frankly, if I have to spend an hour writing your reference, I'm not going to be happy about that because I don't want to have to do all the work that you should have done for me. So it's for most people, I can comment on their work, but if I need to relate it specific to, oh, maybe I won't remember that a year ago she developed her own app and brought it forward, or maybe I won't remember that the way the person joined this new company, he had some red flags in the interview that he told me about, but he totally ignored them when he took the job, or he didn't ignore them. I'm just trying to make up sceneries, themes of that. And that's where I need people to give me the text because that's what I want. What is it you want to emphasize in this job? What is it you want to make sure? And it's not enough for people that almost always in for Sue to say, I am highly recommending. And I'm like, I never would say that. I never would use not just highly or
Yeah.
recommend. I would say, I'm
Yeah.
pleased to write a recommendation for.
Yeah.
That's like my maximum 100% commitment
Yeah.
level. And
Here's
I don't,
another challenge.
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, sir. Here's another challenge too, because I one of the references I did ended up being by phone. And so that adds a layer of complexity because,
Yeah.
hey, can I use you as your reference? Okay. And I wasn't properly prepared or anything, but I knew the individual. The person actually worked with me quite a bit. So I was able to make a thing. And so it was by phone. And it's a series of questions and just going through and answering it honestly. So they had a bunch of questions. So in the end, I was responsive to the questions they had. And so it really was taken out of everybody's hands. And so you answer honestly, et cetera, because for them, they've got a particular line of inquiry that they're going to do. So that creates another situation. So are you familiar with that happening a lot, or is I guess it's mostly by text, by some kind of a text based
Yeah,
system?
it's mostly occasionally I've been asked, I think the last one I did is probably almost a year ago, where someone was on a second round interview and they asked that person's hiring org asked to have a direct call with me. And I repeated things I said. They wanted to know about problems,
Yeah.
strengths,
Yeah.
how would the person handle challenges? And it was a
Yeah.
person I'd worked with over several years
Yeah.
off and on. So
Yeah.
I think that's falling away, the
Right.
phone, but people need to remember that all of the steps in what used to be like send in your letter, get a call for an interview, get hired, right? It was never this long process, multiple steps, different ways, whatever.
Right.
I think that people need to prepare for in their mind and contact people and say, I'd like to use you as a reference and all
Mhm.
of that. We can all be forgiving when they email and say, I just found my perfect job and the reference is due tomorrow or a
Yeah.
application for university. But I also think that probably sound like an old lady now. We've gotten in bad habits where we don't get all prepared. We're not keeping up. And it's not that these people can't keep up. I think there's less of a sense of you need to always be organized towards this. And it may be that I've been working with a lot of younger, newer, emerging professionals right now. And they have a lot on their plates because the job situation is constantly changing, as you and I know. And they're new at all of this and they're trying to figure out what to do. And they have a lot of stuff being requested of them that is making it hard. So,
That kind of goes to the idea that we're trying to help people become their own best career managers because they have to manage their career. And so these are the kinds of steps you have to do. And yeah, it's work. And so whether you're an entrepreneur or a solopreneur or whatever, that's even more complicated because you have a whole marketing and all the rest of it. So this idea that these are the minimum requirements for you to have a successfully progress your career because you will be advancing in positions and you will be changing in jobs, and it's almost a certainty anymore that will happen. So be your best friend by being organized.
thank you. I couldn't have said it better myself. All right, so lots of references. I'll send you one for a Google search if it's useful. I did remember to look at the topic, even though it's not on people's calendars, but will be by the time anybody watches this in replay. Next time we talk, it'll be on the 23rd in 2 weeks. I'm going to talk about ABL, one of my favorite topics, always be looking. And now I've expanded it to ABL, ABR. And it goes along with Ron saying, be your own career manager. ABL, always be looking. ABR is always be ready, which is that part, the second part of always be looking. And coincidentally, in the last 2 weeks, I had two people that asked for short phone calls that I was able to meet with. And both of them wanted help. They're both in jobs. And they said, I need to know how to start aiming at where I want to be going and what should I be doing to manage my career right now, which I thought was great. It helped me outline a process that I could then use AI to say, what did I just say, and make it all nice for me so that I can put together for us a discussion on that. So I think you'll all enjoy that, those of you who can attend. And I will ask Ron to close the meeting, please.
Yeah, thank you, Sue, for this great presentation. It's funny because we do repeat content, but there's always something new. And I think the way that you have organized and provided organizational tools has been very helpful. So I trust that those who watch this replay will find it very helpful. So thank you very much, and I look forward to seeing you and others in a couple of weeks' time. I think that's going to be an interesting topic again.
Thank you, Ron.